No matter what, it is never one group as a whole to blame. It is the loss of the war against evil within those groups, and no matter which group prevails, the only way they cannot be seen in the same light is if they don't succumb to the evil which originates in the prosecution of another group. Religion has taught us something very important. We are on the verge of being gods ourselves. Come the creation of artificial life, we will have ascended to a position of power and responsibility no species has ever held. Religion has taught us how not to be God. We cannot claim omnipotence and omniscience. We are fallible and not wholly capable of fixing all the problems in the world with the click of our fingers. My idea to harness gravity for free energy has in fact been realised centuries ago using such things as clocks. More recently, a British inventor has come up with a solution to cheap, safe lighting for poverty-stricken African families. Sometimes, very rarely mind, usually when I'm ill, I have a really intense feeling when trying to sleep that everything's dimensions are wrong. My fingers feel too big and fat, the duvet feels too thin, everything seems really far away. This will usually be accompanied by all my thoughts being modified so that all characters are either cartoonishly fat or unimaginably thin. Like stickmen almost, even robots become chunky. Back on suicide again. There seem to be quite a few anti-suicide posts popping up at the moment. The most common argument being, it's selfish, and annoyingly a quote from one of my favourite shows, Sherlock, "Your life is not your own." I think these are some of the most ignorant statements ever made. In truth, they stem from people's greed and desire not to lose something they've invested too much time and effort into. Allow me to break down your stupidity into manageable bite-sized chunks, instead of consolidating your existing debts into one loan monthly repayment. The proposal is for suicidal people to live a life of misery on account of the feelings of those around them, an existence that they had no choice in creating. Also, you wish for these people to now live this torturous life, being told their one true desire is selfish, so they would be entirely justified in resenting all those around them whom they are supposedly saving by not killing themselves. The options therefore become: I live a horrible life, resenting those who claim to be your loved ones, or 2, alienate these people to a point where your suicide wouldn't be selfish. I've pretty much decided not to kill myself, and for a while I felt an obligation to myself to not abandon my opinions about the meaninglessness of existence. Edgy bro. And the problem of following a passion that doesn't exist. However, upon watching some random videos on your YouTube, I stumbled across Lewis Rossman, and at first I thought he was an arrogant prick. On the surface he still is, to some extent. That's the persona he conveys, intentionally or not. But after watching his video on depression, he did raise one salient point. He recited a scene from A Beautiful Mind, when John, or something like that, realises who the real people are, and how he can distinguish them through a simple application of logic. Ultimately, it is just pretending, like I said, I couldn't bear to do. But if I really am going to have to stay around for as long as my biological clock makes me, it's the only option I have, really. Here's to pretending the world isn't shit, and that I find things interesting and worthwhile. Well, that didn't last long. My biggest obstacle is denying my belief that within my lifetime, every human contribution to the future will be obsolete in the face of AI. There is nothing I could dedicate myself to where I am likely to have an impact. That was the point of doing it otherwise. I can't enjoy everything knowing this. Thank God pregnancy lasts so long. In fact, 9 months isn't long enough to prepare you for what happens. Can you imagine if it only took a few minutes? You inject this relatively tiny amount of white goo into a lady with your U-stick, and this little thing pops out like a mini-me vending machine. What the fuck am I talking about? What the fucking fuck? Oh, and I just wrote commitment issues, ... suicide. why it's better to leave the kettle empty. If you think about it, if everyone conforms to one method, either leaving it empty or filling it up after they've used it, you will always end up filling the kettle once per cycle. The only things that change are whether you fill the kettle up before or after boiling and using it, and most importantly, how much water you put in it. If you fill the kettle after you've used it, you are only guessing how much water the next person will need. You are less than likely to be correct, leading to energy wastage. If, however, everyone leaves the kettle empty and fills it for themselves, they can put the exact amount they need in. The only thing that you're likely to gain from being the person who fills it after you use it is a dislike for those who don't do the same as you. It's good that humanity is realising how ridiculous the concept of religion is as a whole. It's almost as the whole of humanity is beginning to develop its sense of self as a whole, which is what separates humans from the rest of the animal kingdom in the first place. Some references. While my brain tries to recall information, trying to remember the name of blind pianist Stevie Wonder, my brain names that kept popping up in my head: Freddie Mercury, Eddie Murphy, something Star, Ringo Starr, something Diamond, Fantasy, Frankie, Golden. Oh my god, 2 hours and 20 fucking minutes. Good god. Isn't throwing up after unhealthy meals like an anorexic person might actually quite a clever way to enjoy food without having to worry about the unpleasant monotony of watching your diet? It's a small sacrifice that shrinks with every recital, allowing a life of luxury that would otherwise cost a fat arm and a thrombotic leg. Yes, I realise how insensitive this sounds, but detach yourself from the emotional stigma that this question evokes and think about the equation logically and objectively. Largely in response to this preferred pronouns movement, genotypes exist and have consequences. So largely in response to this preferred pronouns movement, but mostly to people who believe there aren't identifiable biological differences between genders and races. It is essential to treat people of different races or genders with equal rights. However, it must be accepted that there are undeniable distinct scientific differences that are critical, especially in medical and pharmacological settings, e.g. the cancer treatment that was a huge success in clinical trials but was only tested in Asian populations and failed when tested on non-Asian individuals. I don't think I want happiness, although of course, by definition, if I had happiness, I would be happy with it. I don't think unconditional happiness is what I wish for my future self. I want something that I value because it's unique to me and that I worked for. My mind was recently cast back to a small news story from a few years ago. Some people, I seem to remember it being two radio presenter dude cunts, made a video that was part of their show that found its way onto YouTube. The basis of the video was something like they showed a massive pizza to a homeless man, then threw it on the ground in front of him, or they offered him a cup of coffee and poured all the change he had collected into it, or he had a cup full of change and they poured the tea or coffee into it. They then proceeded to laugh, and that was seemingly the end of it. Understandably, people were outraged. However, some defended them, claiming it's just their/my sense of humour. If you don't get it, it's your problem. Or they actually donate a lot to charity or give the homeless person money after they stop recording. Or they're doing it to raise awareness of the issue of homelessness. The final point is the only one that has any remnants of morality, but it's still stupid ultimately. These false defences fall under a flaw of logic. A flaw of logic common to all humans that was brought to light in the second, I believe, may have been first or third, Pete Holmes and Bo Burnham podcast, where they touched on the fact that we give people we're invested in a benefit of the doubt when they believe immorally or outright wrong because you don't know them like I do. Fuck off. Hitler's Hitler, bitch. Well, yes, I'm aware of the Yes, I'm aware of the modest ambiguity of that sentence, and I like it. I'm going to try to do that whole Democritus cheerful despair shit, and accept that if I accept that the world is shit on a basal level, then I can tune out of that stuff, and all that is not utterly detestable will stand out and come to the forefront. I'll let you know when that first thing happens. This may take some time. I'm pretty fed up with being attracted to pretty girls. It just seems too predictable and boring. If solar panels really do work by just having electrons knocked out of silicon by UV rays, surely we could produce a battery that can be left in the sun and the electrons stored before they return to their holes. Nothing special, and what is the point of existence if you aren't? If someone prevents someone else from committing suicide, they should accept full responsibility for that person for the rest of their life. They have stolen their right to make the decision and subsequently must provide ample reasoning to live. If they fail to do so, they must then assist in a successful suicide attempt from that person. When entering an argument with someone, it is very often the case that one side will be at a significant advantage because they have strayed from the norm, and so they, therefore, can't read the rest of that. Whenever I talk about giving up on humanity, I want it to be perfectly clear that I don't want the rest of humanity to come to the same conclusion yet. I think it may be difficult to motivate people to strive for the creation of true AGI if they know that this will also entail the relinquishing of humanity's claim to the throne of the universe. I personally don't have a problem with it. I am under no illusion that others won't. It's important to note that if good people create good AGI, morally speaking, then the only true threat is bad humans. The only potential for evil exploitation is exploitation of the technology by bad people. The AGI, by definition, would only be capable of good. Any natural tendency to evil it has is a result of incomplete planning on the part of its creators. If a child is told by his father that he will unavoidably grow up just to be like his father, or nothing like him, it doesn't matter, and he believes it, he will most likely make the prophecy true. Of course, he will be unaware of his control in the matter, as the effect is not unlike a placebo. However, the situation is probably better described as psychosomatic, but seeing as behaviour is largely down to the mind, I prefer to see it called psychopsychotic. I can't be bothered to sustain myself any longer. Every day should be merry. You should have the merry 1st of January, merry 2nd of January, merry 3rd of January, etc. A useful phrase. I don't mean this in the way you're inclined to take it. The globe, the idea itself. I am beginning to think that no matter what I invent, perhaps with the exception of my facetious hamster ball for kangaroo, someone else will invent the same thing at nearly the same time. This is the result of multiple things, namely, inventions are produced largely according to reactive rather than proactive thought, and thus the most pressing problems of the era will be experienced by many, many people, and a small percentage of them are bound to attempt to find a solution and consequently come to the same conclusion. Also, there are currently 7 or so billion people on this planet. Most thoughts are bound to occur, or have occurred more than once. Most importantly, I think I have written about this before, or at least I hope I have, as it is a rather important realisation. Thoughts/ideas have a timeline. The world governs the way our subconscious works. Our minds are influenced by everything from the media to science, and the mind's eye, or collective focus of the population, will shift its focus accordingly. Thus, in modern times, the importance of renewable energy is in the minds of millions across the globe. The idea itself isn't as new as we might think, but its popularity is, and as a result, the number of inventions and solutions proposed by even seemingly ordinary people is extortionate compared to olden times. Some of the inventions I've come to entirely by myself that I find only years later to be in the pipeline are my airless bike tyre, the idea to focus solar power light in order to increase efficiency of conversion, the idea that I had as a mere child to create an artificial robot plant that could turn CO2 into breathable oxygen in the atmosphere, solar and wind-powered cars, electrically heated socks, and the list goes on. I think synthetic alcohol with no long-lasting effects, comfortable crutch with suspension. Another more important problem regarding passion is, let's say I find a job that I'm truly passionate about. I don't dread going into work or working whenever I don't dread going into work or working wherever I enjoy it. Obviously, to imagine I'd enjoy it so much, I never want anything else is ridiculous. What do I do with my spare time? I can't feel a passion in that. I never had one in the first place. This is why most people can tolerate doing these jobs that just weren't right for these brave entrepreneurs. Oh, hang on. This is an extension of something else. Oh no. I can't follow passion in that. I never had one in the first place. This is why most people can tolerate doing these jobs that just weren't right for these brave entrepreneurs. They know that it allows them to do things they are passionate about in their free time. I don't have anything to be passionate about in my free time, so what is the point of doing a job, especially one that I hate? But the point is no less salient with a job I don't hate, if there is no net gain. What do you do with your time at the moment? You must pass it somehow. Well, yes, it does pass. I watch YouTube videos halfway through because I can't bear anything long enough to watch it all the way through, all the while resenting people telling me I can't kill myself and I should follow my non-existent passion. Something that I've become increasingly aware of as of late is that our consciousness, is constantly changing from one moment to the next. Of course, these changes aren't noticeable except when viewed over a long period of time. All we are, our consciousness, is a list of possibilities of how we will react to whatever stimulus occurs in the world around and within us. Today, if you were to ask me if I believed in God, I would say no. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, I may have said I didn't know 10 years before, and I wouldn't have an intelligible answer. If you were to lift one of these consciousnesses from its respective body and time and place it in the mind of another, it wouldn't be recognised as the same person it had replaced. This is probably the most mumbo-jumbo like thing I've written, and this is almost entirely down to the hijacking of the word consciousness. Another word would be awareness, but they've taken that too. To all people who think they found solace in meditation, perhaps even enlightenment, I imagine you were drawn to it by the all-too-common realisation that the world is fairly terrible. Hunger, torture, agony, etc. And there's no purpose. While this is true, I can almost guarantee you aren't the one suffering. And while it is true that if the whole world could find peace in the present, no matter the circumstances, there would be no suffering, it is also true that you don't need that enlightenment. Instead of accepting everything, but doing so in the knowledge that others are suffering, your purpose should be to give those who are truly suffering the opportunity to reach the enlightenment you are so selfishly in search of. They need it more. I recently became a member of a minority. The fact that Trump was elected president doesn't worry me because I think he's stupid. It worries me because I fear the fact that the character portrayed by him is what people voted for. Even if he turns out to be a good president, that won't be because people voted for a good president. They voted for a person they believed was a racist, misogynistic imbecile, although to them he probably seemed normal. If I've got to do this life thing, and earning a living is a mandatory part of that, I suppose fixing things is alright. If you didn't practice something as a child, there is little hope of mastering it in adulthood. Unfortunately, who you are and what you are capable of is pretty much determined during developmental years. This inability for old dogs to dabble expertly with new tricks is largely due to the increased ability to form new neural pathways in the child's brain, which is absent in later life. So if you don't like who you are, or what you made of yourself, probably more a matter of what society and those around you made of you, unlucky pal, make do with what you've got, or quit the game. People asking me for life advice. You don't ask blind people for directions. Wow, way to amend the blind olds. Oh, and a bit of pseudo-sexism for good measure. I think something I've learned from using the loci memory system is that it really only takes a few run-throughs of your constructed environment to become almost concrete, provided you create memorable enough images and actually assign ample locations with reasonable spacing. Consider learning to use a keyboard. At first you finger type and look at each key before and as you press it. Over time, use multiple fingers and don't need to look whilst you do it, all the while typing immensely faster than previously. I believe this is due to the task's relocation to the visuospatial region of the brain, perhaps more spatial than visual, as you aren't required to picture a keyboard in your head as you type. However, if you were to picture a computer monitor in your head and practice night after night imagining issuing commands into a command prompt, picturing how the computer responds, your real-life programming skills would improve exponentially. Of course, there will be some kids who say they don't need to do this, and people call them savants with natural talents for it, but they are just cases that happened to use the exact same technique by chance. With 7.5 billion people on the planet, it seemed probable that this would inevitably happen. I think the best way to utilise this will be to incorporate conscious, deliberate thinking into any skills learning. A good bit of evidence for this is when I became addicted to Halo, the video game. I started to have dreams about it, and I noticed a dramatic increase in my skill level. Obviously, you can't make yourself dream about something unless you use. You're able to do that with what's the fucking word for it? Lucid dreams. Obviously you can't make yourself dream about something, but I just said you can. But my point is that the point where you are able to dream about something shows your brain has a good enough understanding of it to practice it in its own time and actually work on the processes it knows are required for the skill. I propose whilst learning any skill, especially when we hit a plateau, you implement a blindfold or just close your eyes. You either do the task blindfolded, this may be too difficult, or just picture yourself doing it. This is understandably hard to do, as it sounds boring, but it is exactly the same process employed in the loci system. And I have first-hand experience that even though it seems tedious, it pays off. You may think purely visual tasks, like reading, would be exempt, but you could look at a passage and try to visualise and read it in your head. I think I've found a way to give yourself hypothalamiasia if you dedicate yourself to it. It's very simple. You just create a mental image of a calendar and start and end each day looking at that calendar. Your brain should ascribe all events to that date on the calendar, and if you ever need to know when such and such happened, you know exactly where to look. You can also work out what day it was by knowing one day in a month. Humans are equivalent to the butter-passing robot from Rick and Morty. Back on the thing I was just talking about with the mental images, it all comes down to creating a virtual tool in your head, e.g. accountants creating a mental abacus they can use without a real one around. Chess players creating a virtual chessboard. We should be able to do this for any instrument. It's becoming clear that almost anything that makes someone appear to have supernatural powers, or at least genius-level ability, owes itself to being, at least in part, governed by some denomination of the visual cortex of the brain, e.g. the guy who can do arithmetic faster than a calculator in the brain. The boy, and many others like him, who can remember everything, famous musicians who see music, the genius mathematician who sees numbers in colours, etc. I make use of this, and so do nearly all memory competitors, to store memories, and it is testably superior to rudimentary methods. So why don't we all use our visual cortex for everything? I imagine it has a maximum capacity or something. Maybe it can't handle too many disciplines. Perhaps this is why you don't see many genius mathematician footballers. Maybe the real estate is taken up and can't be reassigned. Importantly, all things that seemingly work in this way appear to offer increased speed of processing, perhaps to account for eyes quickly darting around, etc. Maybe we can decide what we wish to make our best attribute and systematically train our brain to use the visual cortex for the majority of excess processing. Similarly, we could use it in reverse by giving multiple tasks to people and observing which one caused them to use the visual cortex. They will be good at that. Unfortunately, that people who use these loci techniques for memories have to make a conscious, deliberate effort to store them in this way, whilst people with hyperthymesia, or whatever it's called now, auto something, do it effortlessly. This doesn't seem hopeful for hacking the system. Conversely, I would predict the ability taxi drivers develop to store maps uses a similar part of the brain and can be developed in adulthood. Perhaps the secret lies in learning the method systematically in a practical environment, or some shit. Similarly, Tesla claimed to be able to visualize building motors in his head, and they would function perfectly well when constructed in real life. A good experiment would be to see if people with extraordinary abilities that use these areas can multitask with things that also use this area, e.g. try to get people with extraordinary memory to recall dates and events whilst catching a ball or counting them or something. This topic continues. I've already read the bit that is continued not to. I'm getting pretty tired of, first of all, I'm absolutely sickened by the phrase, just follow your passion. What if I don't have one? Which I don't. People claiming that I wasn't the right job for me, and so I upped and left to become a highly successful entrepreneur. Don't let things like parents, money, etc. hold you back. Seriously? Obviously no one in their right mind wants to be sat at a desk working for some cunt all their life, but if everybody did what you did, 99% of the population of people would fail, end up back in the same spot, but worse off financially and emotionally. 2, then there would be no one to do those jobs. They need to get done. Just because you're not doing it doesn't mean it's not right for you. It's not right for anyone. Have these people ever seriously considered what would have happened if they'd failed? I would have built myself back up and tried again. I never would have failed because I'm prepared to work so hard. You aren't special. You are lucky. You are nothing but a number on a statistical spreadsheet. That is an inevitability of probability. and is devoid of any sort of influence from your pathetic idea of your conviction of free will? What if you didn't manage to get back up after failing? Probably bailed out by your parents. After some inadvertent research, I found the word that best describes what I'm going through. It's probably apathy. Ultimately, all we are as humans is slaves to the chemical balances and imbalances that are constantly equilibrating within us. And although there is a simple way to cheat the system by taking drugs, something I should probably know more about than most, my time in this state has allowed me to see the clockwork behind the face, as it were, and I no longer believe I can, yes, I realise how pretentious this sounds, or would ever want to live a life in which I believe I or anyone else has a purpose or meaning. It's true that one could simply fix the chemical imbalance and live the best life they can, but it seems so tedious and dull that death really is more enticing. More enticing on the cake, I said. Well, it would seem I'm not the first to feel this way. Obviously, George Sanders has been brought to my attention. Bravo, Sir George. Back on the passion thing. Also, what if your passion is literally unattainable? I want to be a child genius since birth, on par with Nikola Tesla. Well, at least try, people say. Why? There is only one really serious, this is just me quoting Camus. There is only one really serious philosophical question, and that is suicide. Albert Camus. Now we're getting somewhere. What he's really saying is life worth living? Which is, of course, the most subjective question imaginable. I suppose I could hold the world hostage with the sign and threat, I will kill myself when I run out of money. On no such thing as a fish, it was suggested that people with a sweet tooth are generally sweeter, meaning nicer people. Being someone with a self-proclaimed sweet tooth, I, fueled largely by confirmation bias and sugar, set out to theorise why this doubtful idea may stand to logic and reason. I believe people with a sweet tooth are simply more drawn to sugary things because they get a greater than average dopamine release from it, or they just crave the hormone response to sugar more. Similarly, acts of kindness and niceness trigger a similar pathway, and so they crave them more also. This would suggest these people are only nice to make themselves feel good, but so what? That seems as good a reason as any. People may ask, what if one of my siblings or other relatives expressed the same desire for suicide? Ultimately, if they could justify it logically in a manner that I could hardly argue with, I would respect their decision, but I don't see it happening, and my main quarrel would be that I can see that they enjoy life and will continue to for a very long time. They have so much to add to their lives. I, on the other hand, have enjoyed life greatly, and although I'm not enjoying life, I feel as though all I'm adding to mine is time. Time is a wonderful and powerful thing, but on its own is vacuous and all-encompassing. It's time to start valuing things more personal to ourselves in our partners. Also, I'm going to try to avoid being attracted to makeup rather than the being it is making up. I believe we should value attributes that can be improved by hard work and dedication. Hence, a certain level of fitness is somewhat different to the makeup epidemic. Guys shouldn't be judged by the size of their penis, or girls the size of their breasts/arse. Lol, JK, lol. I'm most interested in humour, kindness, relatability, obviously, and more things that everyone else is interested in, minus the unnaturally good looks. I'm going to start working out with the aim of making my body the best all-round physical machine. Oh my god, what a prick. I believe if I were to kill myself, one of the first things people would do would be to jump to conclusions about why I had done it. One of the most common of which would be that I was mentally unstable, especially those who claim to have an understanding of such matters. They would pick and choose specific aspects of my behaviour and excerpts of writing up to and around the time of my death, and almost everyone would agree with them. This, which is also one of the main reasons I dislike reading post-mortem biographies such as Da Vinci, the First Scientist, makes large assumptions and wildly presumptuous interpretations of the deceased's true meanings and intentions, and due to their inability to correct any mistakes on account of their being dead, these misleading and incorrect observations are perpetuated and become ingrained. Fuck that shit. Dismantleable vehicles. Whilst in the shower, as is so often the case, perhaps less so for some, I found myself thinking back to a time, and I stopped writing for some reason. Oh no, it's all about, continues here about Yuk Fu, the old martial art that I came up with. The stigma surrounding suicide needs to change. People need to be able to talk about it. Of course, this kind of change would seem bad at first. The hype around it would lead to people competing for attention, and a few will go as far as to do it to one-up their peers. But, in the long run, I have a feeling it would greatly reduce the number of mistake suicides. Vegetarianism is the most logical solution to anyone who considers themselves a humanist. The strongest argument for this point, in my opinion, the triangle of biomass. Please stop calling it a pyramid if you only ever represent it in 2D. However, this approach does not take into account the efficiency with which different species convert food sources into effective energy. Obviously, it would be near impossible for humans to be so inefficient at this task that it is more biologically economical to eat the meat of the cow than to eat the grass the cow would otherwise eat. But it does dent the argument and show that the impact of it cannot be taken at face value. Science is limited by humans' inability to imagine what doesn't already exist, much like attempting to invent a new colour. As a result, all hypotheses are variations of things visible on a larger scale, i.e. sound behaving like waves, etc. However, in some cases, such as light or the tube-slit experiment, the behaviours cannot be accurately described by such means, and subsequently we come up with incomplete theories. Being able to put such phenomena into terms we already understand may be as close as we are ever able to come regarding the true nature of the universe. I am by no means saying that these phenomena can't be described by such models, but what if at some point a new phenomenon, which by its very definition cannot be described using the spectrum of human understanding, would we be able to invent a robot that would be capable? On eugenics, off the back of listening to a brilliant podcast by Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins that raised the concerns and hopes for eugenics, I found myself initially unequivocally in support of the notion, but later realised the likelihood of its increasing the potential for parents to hate their children. In the current scenario, it is extremely rare for any person to hate their child. They realise any fault of theirs is down to chance, and they can't really do anything about it. However, if you have hand-picked their attributes and later are unhappy, perhaps a friend picked better genes and made a better child, you will blame yourself for your poor decision, and will be more likely to hate them as a conduit. It is far easier to hate oneself than one's children. Is light four-dimensional? To people who claim you cannot be racist against your own race, I think everyone will agree that Hitler was a racist, homophobic, anti-Semite. So imagine for a second if Hitler had been, whilst holding the same views and opinions, a homosexual black Jew. Would he not be any of those things first mentioned? A true genius who stumbled upon a highly successful invention would realise that they are not a genius at all. There are millions like them. It could have come up with the exact same thing, possibly even did, but weren't as lucky. That's the genius, realising you're nothing special, even though your brain will never allow you to believe it. Things you could dedicate your life to, maybe a combination of all, is a full life. Intellect, sport, competing at anything you do, cooking, job/career, understanding self, understanding the world/universe, science, exploration, discovery, religion/spirituality, maybe not all, family/love, art, creativity, kindness, philosophy, philanthropy. I have a theory that the reason siRNA is more effective than antisense is because the cell prioritizes bound RNA over free RNA. Perhaps free RNA is more likely to be degraded because a potential reason for its being unbound is a fault in its structure and complementarity. Bound RNA, however, is reused, as it is less likely to have a coding defect as it probably wouldn't be bound. The enzymes therefore detach it from its complementary strand. To find another strand it can bind to and repeat the process. At almost no point does the RNA exist not as part of a complex with an enzyme or with another complementary strand. I feel as though when you talk about suicide, people immediately presume you are suffering, and if you reveal that you aren't doing it for such reasons, they feel cheated, or that you aren't being serious, or you don't have a valid reason. These people, like most, are narrow-minded, ignorant people. Similarly, their argument is likely to be, would you let someone you loved commit suicide if they wanted to? To which I say, yes, provided they have a valid reason, and it is a sane decision based on the weighing of pros and cons of the actions consequences. Oh, I think that's it. Oh, hang on, one more thing. We appear to have taken a rather significant tumble into our apocalyptic future with the arrival of the new show, Naked Attraction. Hunger Games, here we come. Perhaps everything obeys the first, law of thermodynamics, stating that entropy always increases or whatever. Disorder increases more importantly, regardless of scale. Perhaps the world is destined for chaos, another word for disorder. Okay, well that was the worst experience of my life. And now I just remembered I've got another little book full of shit I need to get through. Great. Okay, let's see. Let's get it all done right now. I don't have to do it again. For some odd reason, this is at some point read by anyone other than myself. I would like to clarify this is not how I think, it is simply the quickest way to jog my memories by cataloguing the days events. Positive reinforcement versus negative elimination. Thoughts, natural selection, the way your brain works, maybe. Okay. Hang on, what? Where? Okay, most of this is an actual diary, but here's another thing on suicide. myself. I don't want to do it because I hate myself or the people around me. I love myself and those around me. I simply don't want life anymore. I don't see anything worth pursuing, and although I know I'd be perfectly happy if I fell in love and built a family, I resent the idea of devoting my life to something so inconsequential and meaningless. The only thing I can think of that would be worth living for would be developing something truly revolutionary, i.e. AI, to replace humanity, or truly wireless energy or self-powered robots. But I lack the knowledge required, and I'm too lazy and late to start now. People who won't allow you to kill yourself are the ones who should be responsible for giving you a reason to live. If I decide life isn't enough for me, and I've found a very simple solution to that problem, who are you to stop me? Occam's razor to my wrists. I think the root of this is that I know that, again, I've written no longer, but K-N-O-W, that I no longer value happiness. I mean, it's not exactly a reason to live, a feeling. And if that's all we're striving for, I want a better prize, or I don't want to play. Probably the ugliest truth is that in order for humans to survive, they must stop being human. By this I mean the very thing that defines humanity must be forgotten in order for humanity to develop. Survival of the fittest has been cheated, resulting in overproduction of lesser beings who subtract from the overall energy and land available to those whose genetic makeup is best to further evolve the human race. War is the closest thing to a solution, unless we can start planet hopping, which would be awesome, taking advantage of the seemingly infinite energy of the universe. When our star dies, we will need to inhabit a new galaxy, such solar system prior to this. Wow, what a optimistic little child I was. I think many neurological disorders are beneficial, almost creating differentiated humans with predetermined skill sets for specific applications. E.g., many autistic people show outstanding mathematical capabilities. Bipolar disorders seem to create magnetizing/polarizing individuals. Again, the unfortunate truth about asking successful entrepreneurs about how they achieve their success is that they most likely don't appreciate the amount of luck it took to get them there. Although they almost undoubtedly put in hours upon hours of hard work, they most likely assume that meant they were always going to be successful, not stopping to consider all the people who had equally good ideas and put in just as much work but didn't get lucky. The success leads them to believe they have something others do not, and this is why they are more successful in the end. That is why they believe they are more successful in the end. If you don't bring something new or revolutionary to the world, what was the point of being there? Invent a metal detector for buried bodies. Yeah. So that, missing dead people can be found. expanding, and I put expanding. D, so G. Perhaps there were many big bangs where all ones prior to the one which created us collapsed and re-expanded until they overcame the critical expansion rate. Wow, Ollie. That actually sounds almost smart. No, I was into this years upon years ago. Perhaps the next stage in evolution could be man-made robots. The most obvious course of action is to create them in our own image, but this is by no means a necessity. They could fly. They would feed off the energy of the sun and other wasted energy sources. They could be programmed to learn, reprogram, code themselves, have emotions, the desire to reproduce and build families. They could replace us, and that's not a bad thing. I planned a book about prostitution called For Whom the Bell Tolls. Wow. See, I've gone past that stage. Back in time. I said this is long enough ago now where I can look at these things and laugh before it just annoyed me. When it was a bit closer to home, you know what I mean? After a prolonged spell of depression, during which I invested a lot of thought into suicide, not because I hate myself, I love myself, but because I was bored of life and found nothing enjoyable anymore, I also came to realise that I had not taken the right path for me to make any meaningful impact that I would like to make on the world. Truly wireless energy or ex machina level AI. I entered four sentence conversation. I entered a four sentence conversation with a girl on Tinder whose 5-word bio was enough to convince me she was the one. Not really, but 100% positive. Not really, but 100% positive feedback on eBay sounded it did make me think of her as someone I'd like to get to know. And this negligible conversation was enough to make me feel good, in spite of just proving that we humans are mere slaves to our biology. I came up with an app to improve memory that gives you some things and then months away asks you to recall it. So you basically fill out a diary and then it asks you to give you a specific date and asks you to try and recall and measures how accurate you are. Written so far apart in time, randomly. People always seem to excel at whatever they found themselves doing as children, most likely a result of this time in someone's life being the time in which most brain development occurs. Therefore, the neural connections made during this time can grow stronger, quicker. Someone who reads a lot as a child will read faster than someone who starts reading more as an adult, and someone who plays a lot of sports during childhood will always be better cognitively than someone who takes them up later in life. And the idea of over-the-counter genes is in genetic genes. I invented a 3D scanner to match the 3D printer. job when I'm working at Argos not long ago, my job makes me extremely stressed, but I can't quit because I need the money so I can go to uni to get a degree I don't want for a job I'll hate. I have nothing to live for. My household problems are real problems that can't be fixed by talking. Yeah, I guess that probably would be considered a fairly depressed talk. And then I cured my hay fever by just not taking drugs for 1 year, as in not taking antihistamines. And yeah, I just basically built up a tolerance to it, I suppose. Suffered through it. And I also deliberately stung myself with stinging nettles to expose myself to extra histamine. That's it. That'll do. Right, that's done. I don't ever have to do it again.